Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat and I am your host, and I'm so excited to welcome you back to this week's episode with my interview with Dr. Michelle Maidenberg. And I feel so grateful to be able to have her on the podcast because she teaches a very, very important and powerful message around something she calls ACE, that stands for acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. And when I first saw her on Podmatch, again, you guys know I've been interviewing all these people from Podmatch. The reason that her work really stuck out to me is because if you know me and you know my work with family constellation therapy and looking at intergenerational trauma and working with our families, I have always felt innately called to share with people the idea of Christ consciousness, which is acceptance, love, forgiveness, kindness, compassion. And I always feel so challenged in my work to support people in that concept because we live in such a divided, hyper-independent world. And I believe, we talk about this in the episode, that so many of us are allowing our trauma to dictate how we show up in the world. And we're more powerful than that. And we have the capability to live such a different life compared to carrying that stuff around, our experiences and ancestral, epigenetic in nature. And so really why I had her on the episode today was to kind of continue that conversation I'm even having with myself of how do we get people to a place where they can accept their families and have compassion for their families and feel empowered by their families, even when things aren't great. And even when things are great, how do you do that for the rest of the world, for yourself specifically, and even your relationships? Dr. Michelle Maidenberg is a incredible human being with so much knowledge and experience in her own life and working with clients around how to apply this method. And she wrote a book about it. And so I'll tell you a little bit about who she is and what she's accomplished to kind of give some credibility for this awesome interview. And I'm really excited to share the wisdom that came through her today. And I actually had 10 questions to ask, and I really barely asked any of them because I feel like there were just naturally questions coming up in the episode that are in the conversation that really were more heart-centered. And what I also love about this conversation is we talk a lot about values. So keep that in mind as we go through this episode today. So Dr. Michelle Maidenberg has 30 years of clinical experience and has had the honor of helping countless individuals to transform their personal and professional lives. She uncovers the core of emotional avoidance and anxiety that gets in the way of individuals living their best life and the life they want. Hello, I feel like she's talking to me. Dr. Michelle Maidenberg teaches her ACE method, predicated in acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. These mindfulness-based methodologies assist people to get unstuck. Individuals who face personal blocks and limiting beliefs reconnect with themselves and unleash their hidden potential. She's also the co-founder and clinical director of Through My Eyes, a nonprofit 501c3 organization that offers free clinically guided videotaping to chronically medically ill individuals who want to leave video legacies for their children and loved ones. She is also adjunct faculty at New York University and teaches a graduate course in mindfulness practice. She's the board of directors at the Boys and Girls in Mount Vernon. She is a member of the American Red Cross Crisis Team, and she serves on the board of directors of the Westchester Trauma Network, WTN, in Westchester, New York. She's a practitioner that helps people to align with their values and make sound decisions that help facilitate meaningful and lifelong changes. So with that, let's get into this week's episode. You may want to have a pen or a paper or the notes on your phone handy because there are a lot of good sound bites and takeaways from our conversation. And if anything, I think you'll walk away from this conversation feeling a little bit more compassion for yourself and for others, that everyone's doing the best that they can, and how to hold space for that. So enjoy, guys. Michelle, Dr. Maidenberg, welcome to the Heal with Kat podcast. I am so excited to have you on this week. I am really, really ready to receive your wisdom on your incredible modality of ACE and this book that you've written, and for the community to hear more about your journey. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. I would love to just dive right into the conversation because I know that there's going to be a lot of things to receive today with your experience and just everything. So, if you could tell us about you, your childhood story, like the nitty gritty of who you are today and how that's evolved.
Yeah. So that is a work in progress, I want to say. Hopefully we're always evolving, right?
Yeah.
And our childhood, I would say trauma, wounds, whatever you want to call it, always resurface as we go through our transformation. So my parents divorced when I was 3,
Wow.
which is really young. Yeah, I had a younger brother, and so I was the eldest. So I definitely was a parentified child as well.
Oldest
Um,
daughter, too.
I think we're oldest kids. We fall into the unfortunately, right? Like being vulnerable to that. Um, and my 4 grandparents were Holocaust survivors. So I have to start out by saying that because there was a lot of intergenerational trauma. And I'm talking about like being ripped out of their homes as teenagers, being on lines to either go towards like the gas chambers or towards working. And most of their families were murdered in front of their very eyes. And then after that, going to concentration camps. So we're talking about like intense trauma. So you can only imagine. And again, in those days, there was no like treatment, there was no, processing and kind of exposure therapy and everything that we do to help with trauma. But so that trickled into my parents. Unfortunately, they married. My mom was 18 and my father was 19 when they got married.
Okay.
Yes, so it was babies raising babies. Thus, why things, I guess, trickled, into the parenting. So fast forward, there was a lot of disruption, moving around. I went to like 5 different elementary schools, which is, again, a huge, if you could imagine what it's like to keep on reinventing yourself, like from year to year at that age is difficult. So, bottom line, a lot of adversity.
And no stability, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot. I mean, what I've grown to learn, it was really like kind of this compromise around my safety, like physical safety. I constantly like grappled with my physical safety on a lot of different levels. And then, again, there were so many things that happened along the line, of course. And I knew though there was something within me because I'm an empath by nature. I'm a very compassionate. I feel feelings on a very deep level, intense, deep level. And again, I was in that role of parentified child. So I naturally gravitated towards helping others and connecting with others and feeling deeply towards others. And again, I think because of I had one grandmother who constantly, since I was little, I didn't even realize the impact it had on me. But since I was little, she used to tell me stories about the war, but details, really details. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I heard those stories, but it was so interesting because to me it was just a story. I didn't realize, right? And I didn't think anything of it. Only as I got older, I realized like, gosh, what must have it been like to hear that story at like a young age? And how did I absorb that given the fact that I'm an empath? So again, a lot of these things came to me later on in life. And when I was in college, I took my student loans and I paid for my own therapy. Yeah. I somehow had the wherewithal and the understanding that I did not want life to be a certain way and I really wanted to thrive. And when I was in high school, I won the psychology, award because I got the highest grade on my AP exam.
Nice.
And I remember literally like I felt like I won like, like a Grammy or something. I was like so excited, like it was like the best thing. Anyway, I always knew. So I did not have anyone in my family or anybody that I knew that was in this field remotely. So I just did a lot of research and asked around and just gravitated toward it. And I always had this belief also that anyone could do this kind of work. Like no big deal, but I realize now that's not the case at all. Yeah.
Your story is very fascinating in the sense that when, with family constellation therapy, and I apologize, I just really want to like tie this through because I see something so interesting. We talk a lot about the mother wound, but like our mother countries in where that holds us and how that holds us. And it's interesting that your family went through such terrible traumas with the Holocaust, and yet it was almost unintentionally repeated by moving around all the time. It's like I always look at with FCT, it's not the exact things that happen, it's the themes that happen that are continuing to repeat. And
Absolutely.
so when we connected on Podmatch, I was so drawn to your new book, or rather, it's new on Audible. I saw in your emails, but it's not a new book, right? It's been out for a while.
Not that long, but
Okay.
yeah, not
Okay.
that long, years, but the audio just came out. Yes.
Congratulations, because I know so many people prefer to just walk and, listen and all that. But your book, it highlights the use of acceptance, which is ACE, is what ACE stands for: acceptance, compassion, and empowerment, which I love. And I teach a lot about with FCT. And as somebody who's an oldest daughter, who's an empath, who's an intuitive, who's a very big feeler and all of that, I have been so scared. I'm going to be really vulnerable with you in the community, really scared to own that feeling inside of me that I want to help people find more compassion and acceptance and empowerment with their families. And yet I feel that the societal narrative is screw your families, go no contact because it's better to push them away. Like, it's like there's a yes and in this whole concoction with compassion and acceptance. I really would love to hear, where this desire came from for you. What experiences did you go through that you're like, I'm going to have the courage to help people ace their life?
Yeah. So I saw through my practice and through working with people over the years that this was kind of the sticking points where people were having trouble getting over stuckness. Because I'm all about stuckness. I did a podcast on circumventing emotional avoidance, which is, yeah,
I want
which
to
is
talk
the
about that later.
foundation for this, right? Like we circumvent our negative emotions, which leads to stuckness in these different areas. So it is like a methodology or roadmap, which I teach it to people of all different ages, and it really helps with any kind of stuckness. Because if you think about it, as we develop, throughout our lives, we're always experiencing some kind of adversity. There's always barriers. And whether it's interpersonally, whether it's in our careers, whether it's in parenting, whether it's in our, interpersonal relationships, it's vast. That's just life, right? And sometimes things happen that are completely out of our control and unexpected. I mean, I had a situation which was like so horrible, but like the night before last, I met with these two young girls, a 16-year-old and 13-year-old, and I had to tell them with their father that their mom was dying, of terminal cancer. And then the next morning she died, literally. So I was with the daughter last night to just process the grief. This all happened within 2 days. It was like, you can't make this stuff up. This is real life. This is what happens, and this young little girl, this young girl is talking about her regrets and the last memory she has of her mom. And she's a teenager. So there was a lot of, regrets in terms of connection and arguments. And that's what's sticking in her mind at this point, so, we're always going through something, always. And we can't take life for granted, even for a moment, because anything could happen, like I just said. So, in terms of evolving to this place, acceptance is not about like, okay, this is great and this is who I am. People get concerned that they're going to have to live a life of mediocrity if they accept who they are. And that's not what this is about. It's about noticing. And if you accept that, what does that even mean? What does that mean if you actually see yourself? Right. And this whole nuance around like wholeness, right. And thinking, feeling that we're good enough. And there's so many messages, both from our families of origin, from the outside worlds, that counter that on a daily basis. We always have to kind of be in conflict with that, literally. Yeah. So I talk about the barriers because we need to know about the barriers that get in the way of that. And then we need to know how to integrate that information. And compassion, we learn about being compassionate towards others. We do not learn how to be compassionate towards ourselves. We do not know how to build on self-love and self-efficacy and self-belief. And by the way, productivity is all about confidence. People who produce and people who are effective in whatever they're trying to accomplish and people who thrive are those who have confidence. So it's all about confidence building, this whole entire platform. And then empowerment is really about doing what you want to do that's in line with your values, not in line with your thinking and feeling. We cannot rely on that. We have to rely on our values. So the problem that I find with, again, integrating this information is that we could change habits. There's been a slew of books written on habit change in the past couple of years that are amazing. I read all of them. But guess what? We still haven't mastered how to sustain behavior over time. People know how to make changes all the time, but they don't know how to sustain it. And that is where the magic is. And that's what I talk about too. So it's really putting together all of this, which are skills that we need throughout our lives, and I could say that I practice this on a daily basis. Like, I'm living proof, you know and I see it in the transformation of the patients I work with, the clients. I mean, yesterday I had a couple of examples of it where I said to, the people I was working with, I'm like, do you remember what you were like when we first started working together? Would you have ever? So I'll give you a good example today, election day, right? Yesterday. Gosh. This client I was working with, I worked with her as a teenager, and this happens a lot. And, they come very reluctantly as a teenager because their parents force them to, and, they need to work on something very prescriptive. And then they're working with me, for a number of sessions, and we kind of work on whatever they're there to work on. And, that's kind of about it. They circle back to me inevitably, once they're in college, and they circle back on their own, and they're like, when I was with you, I actually gave you a little bit of hard time, and I really wasn't into it. I was only there because my mom, but they're like, I remember a couple of things that you said. It stuck in my mind, and I really am ready now. And then, like, off to the races. Like, wow. So this girl, she said, I have to tell you this. She said, election day, and how I feel about it. I was like, yeah. So she said, well, I belong to a family group chat. And she said, I went into the chat and I told them that it's not a good idea that we have dialogue about the election because we have opposing, viewpoints, and it's going to get like tumultuous and nasty. And like, this is better left unsaid. And like, right. And I was like, and this is a person, people pleaser, does not assert her needs, like sits in the like distress, just because it makes everyone else happy, even though she's unhappy. I was like, you go, girl,
Love that. I resonate with her. So I love that. I'm like, you need to teach me something.
I said, remember when we first started work together, would you have ever done this? And she was like, absolutely not. Never. It wouldn't even occur to me.
So then how do you use ACE for something like that? What are the steps that you're taking people through to learn to accept? Because it also brings up something else for me, which is I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well. Many times with my clients who are no contact, I'm like, hey, you don't need to be in contact with them, but you still have to accept who they are. And maybe you can find some compassion for what they went through, even if not being in a relationship with them. And maybe you can see that what they went through helped you to work through everything to feel more empowered to do things differently, right? Like, just love that. So take us through that.
So if you were actually to use this model, okay, let's say you were contemplating on how you wanted to interact with family members, let's say a parent, because that's the most kind of difficult, I think, to navigate through, right? Because we're told that, every family constellation has to look like A, B, and C, right? And ideally we want it to be that way on a very fundamental level, because that is, again, intrinsic in who we are as humans, right? We gravitate towards parents. And also, if our parents don't accept us and don't show us love, then what does that say about the rest of the world? It's a scary concept. It's a really scary concept if you think about it, right? So, the propensity is to, again, distract, deny, cut off anything that is uncomfortable in our bodies and our minds. So if somebody's causing us distress, disconnect, right? Or else, what else do we do?
Right.
Now,
Survival.
yeah, so it is survival, definitely. And our mind is wired to protect us from danger and discomfort. That's why it constantly avoids these negative emotions, right? And that's a neurological, like, kind of concept that our brain just does. And it takes its role very seriously, right? At all times. And sometimes it could be very hypervigilant. So what I always say is, how can you be a good enough daughter? And what does that actually mean to you, right? So if you were to accept the relationship as is, not the way you want it to be, not the way you wish it would be, not the way you dream it could be, if it was in the present moment, in this moment, the way it is, then what? Okay, that's number one. If you were to also really feel your worthiness, okay, that you have this family constellation and you are worthy. Okay. And you are to really lean into your values, which may be family, which may be thoughtfulness, which may be loyalty, which may be whatever that is, right? And what is it rubbing up against that's making you feel like you want to distance, right? So let's say, because this happens very often, right? The family values are drawing you to the family, right? But maybe dignity and self worth, right, is drawing you away from the family because of the interaction or the communication or the relationship or whatever there is there. Now, both are equally important to you. Okay. But you get to define what good enough means. And it's interesting because I had a situation with my mother the other day.
Real
She
life
said,
example.
I could give it to you. I'm debating whether I should, but it is a really good one, though. I have to tell you, gosh, is it a good one? So my mother and I have a little bit of I would say, a challenging relationship. She has a lot of trauma, formative trauma, and I do set very stringent boundaries with her. I have to. Okay. Over the years, I've literally transformed from being maybe angry, frustrated, etc., right, to being compassionate. And I really mean that. I have a great amount of compassion. I still I still lean into my grief and other things that come up with that, but I also do for like, and I don't get triggered anymore, which is something I've been working on tremendously. Yes, because I'm able to distance from it. It's not about, oh, that's emblematic of who I am, or, etc. Right? So I'm able to really distance, and those feelings, those visceral, like physiological, kind of emotional, somatic feelings that were coming up was really based on my childhood, based on feeling not good enough, based on feeling like I should be doing something, right? Or I'm not doing something that's causing the relationship to be the way it is, or fear, anxious attachment, you know, and on and on. I could go on. What shows up to me, for me today as an adult. But so anyway, she sent me this text, and she's a lot better at acting out. She doesn't act out as often as she used to because of me setting the boundary that I've set. So it's very on the surface, which is totally okay, and it is actually in a place where I feel comfortable, and I feel like I could engage in the way that I want to and being the person I want to be, because I will not ever compromise on being my best self. No one will ever put me in a position of me not being my best self. That is like off the table, because I go to sleep with myself every night and I have to look at myself in the mirror, and I will not have that because that's not okay with me. And no one triggers me. I get triggered.
Oh, interesting. So you're not giving the power to the other person. You're taking the responsibility within yourself.
Completely. If like the text that was sent to me right away, I got that, that visceral feeling of like, literally, it was like a combination of like frustration, anger, sadness, it was like literally like this like cacophony of feelings that kind of came up, which again, very natural. Anybody would feel the way that I did. However, I sat down and I was like, again, wow, what must this be like for her? Right? If I were to put myself in her shoes, coming from who she is and the trauma that she has, right? What is that like for her? Okay. Yeah. Very
I
hard.
mean, you're talking, I mean, it
Very
is
hard.
it's
Very hard.
profound stuff, and I think it's simple enough to be that profound. Like, sometimes the most simplest things are the most life-changing, because when we complicate them, it almost feels like it's coming from the ego. But it is this moment of like, I've had to do that a lot with my dad. He has a lot of trauma from being raised in Lebanon and moving a bunch of times, like so much of that war energy and just the instability and the anxiety. And so many times I have to take a step back and then the ego comes in, and the ego's like, no, if he knew better, he should do this, and that's just me getting wrapped up in my thoughts. But really, when I'm being heart-centered, which is something I deeply value, for me it's a value to be heart-centered, sometimes I have to move through the emotions of triggered, anger, grief, okay, the grief lingers for a while. I'm going to cry for a little bit. And then I'm going to be like, okay, he doesn't have the tools. I
Yeah,
do. I'm not going to parent him, but I'm going to say how I feel and be open and
yeah,
honest about it.
that's
And
right.
I think that's what comes with the emotional maturity of learning how to
Yes, that's
do what
exactly.
you're saying. I think is what I hear you saying.
And I'm happy to even read you. I'm happy to read you my response because I
Yes.
think, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's more important. I think
Sure.
than, yeah, because I think that's more important to hear that. It doesn't matter what she wrote, but so so this is an example, okay, of really using the methodology, right? I was accepting of kind of where she was coming from. I was accepting my feelings about the situation. I was in the present moment instead of kind of, again, unleashing my inner child wounds, because that happens all the time, unfortunately, right? Because that's what gets triggered for me, which is, getting angry, needing somebody to listen to me, getting validated, like all of that stuff that we want, because, we're kids and we want that and it's important to
Yeah.
us, like all that stuff. So, no. And I said, based on my values, do I even want to respond? Like, what does that even mean? So, the conflict in values right there was, again, dignity, right? Asserting my needs or asserting myself, I would say, dignity, right? And family values, right? And I knew in that moment, okay, that my desire to respond wasn't to get a response back or wasn't to get anything in return, okay? It was just me asserting my dignity. That's it.
For
So,
you.
for me, so no matter how she responded, I'm totally okay with that, literally. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. Like, that was for me to go to sleep at night, right? So just the premise of the text was really around, she was upset that my son didn't get back to her because she texts him and he just doesn't respond to her. So the question she ended off with, which was the part that was was, oh, his birthday's coming up. Maybe I won't send him a happy birthday, because he doesn't deserve it because he doesn't respond to me. Yeah. Which is that part of yeah, that traumatized part of her. Yeah. It's like a totally subconscious. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever. We won't even get into that. So this is how I responded. I said, he doesn't respond to anyone. Stop taking it personally and understand that he's a distracted kid that's saturated in his studies and life at college. Not everything has to be taken personally. Focus on who does respond to you rather than who doesn't. You're 73 years old. Time to ease up. Appreciate what you do have and rid yourself of the resentment and bitterness. Do you really want to leave this earth with so much frustration, anger, and bitterness? Is it really worth it? And that's it.
But you can hear in your response the acceptance, the compassion, and
Yes,
the empowerment. And not only are you doing it for her, it sounds like you're also doing it for yourself.
totally,
Yeah.
totally,
I
totally.
love that.
That was for me. That was for me, solely for me. And if she got something out of it, good. If she didn't, oh well, that's okay too. You know what I mean? Now, here's this. What I also know about my mother and my father, for that matter, is they throw a bomb, okay, and run for the hills, and it's as if nothing happened. Like, literally nothing happened. So I knew that,
I'm
I
laughing because I get it. Sorry.
knew I wasn't going to, first of all, I knew I wasn't going to get a response. Okay. Second of all, I knew that it was going to literally just be like, whoosh, right? And what's so funny? I got a text yesterday that was about the election and had nothing to do with anything. And I'm laughing because I have to laugh. I have to say, and actually the laugh literally comes from a place of compassion, sadness and compassion. Wow, like I know who I am and I know what I have to offer. And I know the loving, caring, compassionate, kind person I am. And it's actually sadness that she can't take advantage of that and she can't receive that. And that actually comes from a really sad place for me because she's missing out. She really is missing out. And that's really sad.
It's that missing out on that true connection, I feel like, that
And
opportunity to put things aside.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sadness for me because
Yeah.
I don't have the ability to have a mom who's attuned and like connected and but guess what? Like I do that with my kids. I have that kind of relationship with my children. And I work on it every single day, with all four of my kids. So that is like, I stop the cycle. Like boom, like that to me is like the most important thing ever.
When you were done talking, I was literally going to say, well, you are a cycle breaker. By definition, you are literally breaking the cycle just by being you, by being your authentic self, which is what who wrote the book, who helps people, who's a mother. Like it's
Totally.
it's totally tangible that you are just being your authentic self. And I love that you also just acknowledge that, like, hey, this isn't gonna be easy and you're gonna have difficult emotions around it. And it
Exactly.
really seems like you're alluding to the idea that we can't get to acceptance, compassion, and empowerment without navigating our own emotional avoidance and what it means to essentially
Absolutely.
disassociate from ourselves. Hey guys, it's Kat with a little break in today's episode to share with you a really exciting offering I have called the Age Mapping 3-Day Mini Course. You may have heard me talk about this before. I'm really excited to share it with you, and I created this course to help you take the next step in your ancestral healing journey with me. Whether you've just taken the cycle breaker quiz or we've already done a family constellation therapy session together, wherever you're at on your journey, this age mapping mini course is an incredibly supportive and informative workshop to take part in. In just 3 days together, we'll uncover the stories hidden in your family's past by mapping the ages of key moments of trauma within your lineage. With that, you'll be able to see how those moments could still be replaying and influencing your life today at those same ages. It's wild how it happens. On day one, you'll experience my powerful ancestral subconscious meditation. It's my favorite tool that I've created. And here you'll connect with the loving wisdom and guidance of your ancestors. I have countless testimonials of people who are just like you, who have been able to receive love, wisdom, guidance, and clarity by contacting their ancestors and their family through this meditation. I just love it. On day two, we'll dive into the age mapping exercise itself, and we'll explore where certain trauma patterns or themes might be passed down through your family line at those certain ages. Many times we don't realize how stuck family trauma can be at certain ages and how those ages can activate within us in our lives. This is energetic and this is also epigenetic, which leads into day three, where we'll geek out together on the topic of epigenetics, which can explain the way that trauma is passed down generation after generation. I've said this before and I'll say this again. It's not just energy. Your body is responding to the stored trauma as well. By the end of this workshop, you'll discover a new spark inside of you, or at least that's my hope, realizing that you have always had the power to grow, evolve, and become the person that you dream to be. The power of becoming a cycle breaker has always been in your hands, and I want to help you create that magic. The entire workshop is just $35, okay? $35, that's it, for an investment into you. So, are you ready to dive into your ancestral stories and see what's awaiting for you on the other side? All you have to do is go to catdao.com/age map or visit the link in the show notes below. Again, that is catdao.com/age map or visit the link below in the show notes. Your transformation starts with understanding your past, and I am so excited for you. So, can you get into what emotional avoidance is and how it shows up in our thinking and decision making in our relationships?
Absolutely. So, emotional avoidance has to do with the way our brain is wired. Okay. So, like I said, our brain is wired to, basically protect us from any kind of danger and discomfort. Now, when I say the word danger, I'm putting it in quotes because it's perceived danger. Our brain doesn't have the ability to differentiate what's actually dangerous. Our differentiation has to really do specifically with understanding, like, being in a certain social situation or interacting with certain people could be dangerous. What does that even mean? Right. But it has to do more with what comes up for us and how we perceive danger or discomfort in our bodies and our minds. Right. So we're always going to gravitate towards more comfortable feelings. Right. And situations that evoke positive emotions. Right. And positive sensations in our body. Now, the problem with that is that negative emotions are so critically important in helping us learn about what's important to us. So, I'll give you a really good example that I used with that young girl yesterday, okay, which stays with me forever, really. I was working years ago with this also a young girl, and her dad, suicided, unfortunately. And it was I worked with her like about a month or two after it happened and, really helped her with her grief, her bereavement. And it was incredible. She really, really kind of, again, worked through it in a, positive way. And then it was like maybe a year after that. And she came in and I would see her periodically just like for maintenance and stuff. So she came in one day and she was like hysterical crying. And I said, "What's going on?" Because she was doing so well. I didn't understand, like, out of nowhere, where's this coming from? I said, "What's going on?" So she said to me, I'm so upset. I'm so upset. Like, I realize I'm not thinking about my dad as much. And I'm scared I'm going to forget him. Like, I'm petrified that I'm going to forget him. And I love him so much. They were very close. They were very close. I'm petrified I'm going to forget him. And I looked at her and I said, "Sweetie, you have nothing to worry about." So she was looking at me like, "Huh?" I said, "You have absolutely nothing to worry about because your brain won't let you do that." So I said, so she goes, "How do you know? What do you mean?" I said, "How are you showing up today? What feelings are coming up for you?" She's like, "Guilt, you know, shame." I was like, "Mm-hmm." It could come up in all different shapes, forms, and sizes. It could come up in joy when, like, you have a memory of something joyful you did together. It could come up in, again, shame, right? Or fear. I'm scared I'm going to forget him. But it's going to keep showing up and it will never, ever let you forget him. Because today, while you were feeling the guilt, you were remembering him. And she was, yeah, I mean, you had to see it was like 10 pounds of bricks off her shoulders. And she was like, "I never thought about it that way. Oh my goodness, thank you so much," And she was fine after that. Literally, it never came up again.
That's so beautiful. It's so true that it makes me think of my grandparents who passed almost 14, 15 years ago. I still think of them every day, whether it's something positive or negative or whatever it is. It's like honoring them never stops.
Yes, but it's more about what our brain does, right? So when we have there, I always say there's pain and values and pain. Okay. When we feel pain, it's indicative of values being rubbed up against. And when values are rubbed up against, we're going to feel pain. Now, having an indication of those negative emotions, whether it's sadness, frustration, anger, disappointment, whatever it is important for us to understand because it connects us to what's important to us. We need that information. It helps us so that we are actually leaning into being our best self and living the life that we want. We can't function in this world without that. So when I responded to my mother, and this is a good example, one of the reasons I did that is because I had one of the values in my mind, which was the relationship. So I knew that if I wouldn't have responded and I would have just repressed my feelings, which I typically do, I would sit with resentment, which would be an inhibitory toward my relationship with her. So I was actually leaning into my value of relationship or family by responding in a dignified, respectful, connected way.
This is life-changing stuff. I mean, now I understand why your book has just been so incredibly resonant and successful with people, truly, because it reshapes. I've had this view for a long time that most of us operate from our trauma and we don't realize it. And what you're asking us to do is to take radical responsibility for owning that and then reshaping the way that we show up in the world based on our perspective of others, which you're literally almost demanding from us a more humanitarian approach to our relationships.
Dictated by your values.
Dictated by your values, which is something you don't think about. You know, my boyfriend, when I first met him, he brought
Yes.
me the Brene Brown values list and he said, circle your top three. And so we both circled our top three and they were very similar to each other, and growth was one of them. And I never really thought about values until he brought it to my attention. And after that, I was like, God, values really do dictate our communities, our jobs, our self worth, everything. It's spot on. Um, what are some of the reasons that someone would develop emotional avoidance? Like, could you give us some real life examples, or
We
is it?
all, no, we all do.
Yeah.
This cuts across
Okay.
every race, religion, gender. Yeah, I've been like, yeah, I've been interviewed on podcasts all over the world, and India, China. I mean, whatever. Like everyone, when I talk about this, they're like, because we're human. We're human. Negative emotions bring up a lot of like disconnect and avoidance and the propensity, right, to disconnect from ourselves, from others. It's just what happens. If you had a choice, would you rather feel joyful or would you rather feel angry or frustrated or sad? I mean, come on.
Well, I think a lot of people don't really know, to be honest, at least from my perspective, depression and sadness became more of a comfortable emotion because I felt it more often than I felt joy. So it took me until working on myself in my 20s and my 30s to go, oh, wait a second. I actually don't want to do that. I don't want depression to identify who I
That,
am, but
yes,
then it is rubbing up against that. So interesting. So everybody experiences emotional dissonance based on, you're saying, their level of comfortability in sitting in their emotions and their values.
completely. That's the only way you get to know yourself. Yeah, yeah. And by the way, like I said, that's an evolution because, for me, I discovered that I mean, my default is repression. Yeah. And that's from childhood. That is the way I protected myself as a child, and I didn't realize how, like, again, how remote I was to myself. And by the way, this is not like, um, this is like a new discovery to some extent, relatively speaking, because I literally had the belief, and I'm not even kidding you, I had the belief that I'm so happy what I went through in my childhood because it made me the resilient, like confident woman I am today. And I'm so appreciative of it. And I'm a woman warrior. And I'm like, I'm good and I'm unscathed. I literally believe that. I'm not even kidding. And of course, I've been doing a lot of very deep inner child work. Wow. Wow. Like now I see myself, the good, the bad, the ugly, and nothing. I'm happy to like apologize when I need to. I'm happy to own my stuff. I'm happy to dig dirty and deep. I'm happy to be flawed. I'm happy to fail. I'm happy, whatever comes my way, that's okay. Yeah. And I'm fully okay with it all. And not okay where, of course, right? I still have feelings about it and I still work on it and it's still challenging, but I don't shy away from it. I don't turn away from it. Because if I turn away from it, I shy away from it, I'm turning away from myself. Okay. And that's not okay. It's just not, because you make decisions based on that lack of confidence and the lack of groundedness and also not being in the present moment. And that, again, does not allow you to be like your best self. And the other thing I don't know if I shared with you, but I have a nonprofit that
Yes.
that videotapes, people who are, chronically medically ill, and they leave a video legacy. And I speak to people who are dying, right? And gosh, to like leave this earth and have regrets. Just the thought of that. Yeah.
Do you feel that your relationships in life are more fulfilling and connected because you're so rooted in this ACE concept or your values or your authenticity and being present? Do you find, like, what are the benefits that you've noticed in your immediate life because of that?
Well, it led to a lot of changes in my life, I have to tell you. Huge, like huge ones. One, divorce, after 25 years of marriage. It's
Wow.
a really long time. And I don't, publicize it because, but I don't have shame. I have sadness, absolutely have grief, but I don't have shame because it's kind of where I needed to be, and I know I so appreciate like the person I was married to. He's amazing. We have a great relationship. We co-parent beautifully. Um, and he was the person I was intended to be with and to parent with. And I believe that. I really do. I really, really believe that. However, I also discovered that I was repressed for many, many, many years, and it didn't allow me to really see myself, which has been like absolutely mind blowing. And even the choice of people that I'm gravitating toward, right? Yeah, has been also like incredibly life changing, because like just when you think, oh, I got this, I know myself, I'm good. No.
I can imagine that when you start to demand that from yourself, you then raise the bar for how you feel the other connections should go. And then
Yeah.
it's almost like you take this unconscious inventory of what's happening around you and then you start to go, oh God, that doesn't feel as good as I thought it looked.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm experiencing that a bit with certain relationships now. It's almost just kind of like, oh man, that looked really cool. It doesn't feel very good. I'm going to
That's
allow myself to take a step back. So that's really empowering.
when I was writing the book, I came to that discovery. I was like, I really like took a like again the veneer. I really believed it, by the way. It's not something that I was cognizant or conscious of at all. I really wasn't. And what I appreciate also about it is I wasn't ready to leave my relationship because family is such a fundamental core value of mine that I wasn't ready emotionally, psychologically, or in any other way to even consider it. It wasn't in any like it wasn't in my kind of tunnel vision at all. So it happened when I was ready to kind of really look at myself and and that's okay. That's where I needed to be. That's where I am. I can't go back in time. I don't, etc. So, but I could see like when I was sitting and writing the book, I literally said to am I living my best life? Like if I died tomorrow, what would that feel like for me? Like, what space am I in? And that was really hard. I have to say, it was so challenging, and it's still hard now. Like, I have my moments, um, but you have to also respect kind of where you're at, and pay homage to that as well, right? And understanding that it's an evolution. Like I'm continuing to evolve. I'm continuing to discover things about myself. But I think, and sometimes the other day I got like a little sad because I said to myself, wow, for me to have made those decisions, I was thinking about where I must have been in my, emotionally, and I got sad. I was sad for that person during that time that made those decisions.
So you're
Yeah.
saying that ACE is not only just important for others, which is, I think, a lot of time where the focus goes. You're saying that it's
No, no, this
for
is
us.
very about interpersonal. Interpersonal. It's intrapersonal, but it's intrapersonal, but it's interpersonal also. So intra is like within yourself. And then again, it's a beautiful thing because it trickles, right? So like it's a domino effect. If you, and we know this, right? Before you get into like healthy relationships where you could connect like on a deep level and really be your authentic self, you need to first connect to yourself. That's
Yeah.
just the way it is. Yeah. So you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to take a deep dive because then you repeat patterns of behavior. That's just what happens. We always try to heal our past through our present. And again, what ends up happening, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy and it's a cognitive dissonance. We strengthen those kind of false beliefs. And then we go back into those patterns and it's like just this revolving door and it's just not healthy. So when we're able to really see it fully and clearly, we're able to then challenge ourselves. And by the way, the challenge is hard, right? Because you're challenging parts of yourself that may get insecure, that may get fearful. All this stuff percolates. And, my therapist said to me, Michelle, when you get into the right relationship, oh, you're going to see, you're going to feel really challenged. And it's so true. It's so true. It's like the worries come up, anxieties, like my, anxious attachment is like, woo, it's flaring up.
I heard this beautiful quote from Dr. Gabor Mate, who said that the greatest thing you can do is be with someone who really challenges your deepest wounds.
That's
My
right.
boyfriend does that for me. He calls me on my shit, and I hate it, but it's made me more real and more authentic, and it's actually helped me sort of, I don't want to say kill off, but really work through the people pleasing, the shifting and shape shifting for others, and the codependency and all of that, to the point where I'm like, why would you want to be with me if you know these parts of me? And it's like, no, he demands that. And I think that's really beautiful, not just in romantic relationships, but I mean, even in professional relationships,
My friendships.
all
Yeah.
kinds. Yeah.
And by the way, so, there's a difference between challenging you and rubbing up against your wounds,
Okay.
right?
What's the difference?
Well, because there are people, again, if you're reworking those and healing, trying to heal those wounds through someone else, which is what we do, we just naturally do that. Sometimes, again, it will then activate their own attachment wounds. Yeah. So it becomes, right? So it becomes it could become really unhealthy. Yeah, yeah. So if somebody could, let's say when I get dysregulated or activated, which happens, because I have high demands and like judgments and whatever, because of that's how I protect myself, right? If somebody could kind of know that about me and understand that that's a protective part of me, it's not necessarily a mean part or a condemning part or whatever, even if it may come out as possibly criticism or whatever the case is. But if they could get then they could say, when you said that to me, that kind of hurt my feelings, right? And I'm not sure like where you're at or what that meant to you, but I just want to let you know that. And then I could say, oh my goodness, you're so right. Like that just, I don't know where that came from. Well, I have to explore where that came from, right? Or, you know what? I said that, but it wasn't accurate. That's not actually what I meant. I meant that I'm fearful. I'm scared right now, and that when that shows up for me, I get really scared. And then the person could come and embrace me and say, that scared part is okay. And if you could express your fear instead of act out on it, that would be really more helpful. And it could help me understand you better rather than get defensive. And I accept you for who you are. And I know that you're a well intentioned, loving person, you know, like mind blowing. You know what I mean?
You just
Yeah,
changed the game on conflict resolution completely.
exactly. Rather than, which is what happens if you're not healing, right? And you're kind of going up against your attachment wounds, which happens a lot. It would be, why are you saying that about me? Like, what's wrong with you? You know, um, you're such a mean person. That was like really obnoxious, and I don't appreciate that. And then like ghosts you, walks out of the room or walks out of the house or whatever the case is. And my attachment wounds are like, ugh, like,
Yeah.
yeah, kill me. Yeah, kill me
You
right.
even mentioning that, I'm like, oh, I don't like the feeling that she's
Well,
bringing up in
that,
me.
that is like that is like, yeah, like that is like the worst literally thing you could do to me, when I'm in that space, the worst,
Ugh.
attachment issues like go, yeah, off the kilter. Um, but that's such a difference. God, if somebody really gets that about me and if they care about me, right? And again, vice versa. Like I need to get that about them, what their needs are, like what activates them, like where that comes from for them rather than demonizing defensiveness, protectiveness, etc. So it's all about working together, again, with this precept, with this model so that you could both align. And by the way, it's not just an intimate partner or, I do this with my friends, literally. One thing that I think my friends will say about me and I appreciate about myself is I am very expressive. I put it out there. I just wrote an article because I'm a Psychology Today blogger about 9 tips for deepening connection and communication in relationships. But it was about how do we get vulnerable in our communication? How do we connect in our communication towards other people? And like some of my friends called me and they're like, that seems so hard. Like, I don't know if I could do that. I'm like, try it. Let's see.
Can you like email that to me so I can link it in the show notes? Because I think a lot of people will want to read that.
And I'm so excited. It got like 108,000 reads so far.
Congrats.
Yeah,
That's
which is cool.
amazing.
That's fun.
Well, we've talked so much about, the ACE method, and we've talked about cognitive dissonance and emotional dissonance and all of that. And we kind of alluded a little bit to this in the beginning of the episode, but I kind of want to hone in on it with this one question.
Yeah.
And it comes from personal experience and also watching it with clients. How do you feel that ACE can help us with our families when we're dealing with heavy traumas and experiences? What would you suggest?
Yeah. It's, you have to go through kind of, again, being in an accepting, it's, again, I'm so dulling it down. It's not giving it justice, but it's like really kind of acknowledging and accepting kind of where you are in that space, the impact it has on you. Again, things may not change because that is the way it is. And that's how the personalities are and the relationships and the dynamics, that are kind of formed in that family. But having self compassion when those moments do come up, because that is critical. It's not about changing it, it's not about problem solving it, because often that's like, I can't change my mother. I can't. I just can't. That's just the way it is, right? And if I'm in a place, suffering, the definition of suffering is wishing things were different. Yeah. So I'm not going to change my mother, and I'm not going to suffer by thinking I can and wishing that I can, because that's just not realistic.
Mm.
Okay. And then how can I empower myself by behaving on behalf of my values and build my confidence so that I could manage those relationships better, whatever that looks like. Yeah.
Is there a time in our lives where ACE doesn't apply? I don't think so, but I'm curious if you think so.
I have to say no
Yeah.
because, yeah, I mean, I use this like with everything. I'm not even kidding. I use it when I communicate to my kids. I use it when I interact with colleagues. I just use it all the time. Like literally, like if you said to me, why did you make that decision? I could actually explain it to you. I could kind of walk you through it and explain it to you, what was going through my mind, what, my values that I connected to. If I had a conflict in value, like I could go through the whole thing. How did I maintain or sustain certain behaviors? Like what did I, yeah. So it's kind of the way I think, I breathe, yeah, function.
I can relate to that, honestly. I think a part of me started realizing that I won't be able to have the relationships that I want with my family if I don't accept them to some extent. And again, your definition of suffering is so profound. It's like wishing things were different, and we keep ourselves stuck. And I think that's where we get into the ego, where, well, they should be doing this. It's like, actually, this is what your reality is, and this is what their reality is. And it just kind of is what it is. You get the chance to move forward if you want, or you don't. Sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah.
If somebody was listening to this episode and they felt intrigued by the ACE method and they were going to read your book, but they haven't read it yet, and you wanted to leave them with one empowering, loving message, what would that be?
Empowering, loving message. That's a good question.
Even if they felt intimidated by ACE, let's just say they felt intimidated but curious.
Sure. I would say that, take a moment, literally close your eyes and ask yourself whether you're truly living your best life and the life you want to be living. Okay.
Do you think
Really
we ever get there?
ask yourself that. I could tell you that if I died tomorrow, and I really mean this, I would die with peace. I would.
That's
I would
beautiful.
feel at peace. I don't think a lot of people could say that, unfortunately. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean my life is perfect. It doesn't mean that I always am perfect. It doesn't mean that my relationships are perfect by any means. But I know that I try my best. And I know that I'm very thoughtful and mindful in my actions and decision making. I know that, like, unequivocally. You cannot argue with me about that because I put time and intentional effort into it. So I just want people to really tap into, thinking about whether if they left this earth, whether that would be okay with them and they'd feel kind of a sense of peace and tranquility. And everyone deserves that. I really mean that. Like I want you to walk through life with your head up high and feeling proud of yourself and feeling whole and feeling good enough. Because I have not always felt that way. And I work with people who don't. And I see the difference it makes when people actually do feel that way. And the difference in their behavior and the difference in the way they approach life is remarkable. And I wish that for every single person walking on this earth, literally.
It sounds like you've honored your process, you've honored parts of your life, and you've been willing to move forward from them. And I think that's beautiful. It has been such a gift to learn from you, and I can't wait to read the book. I have it on my Audible. I think you sent it to me.
I did.
But yeah, I'm in the process of reading like 8 different books right now on many different things. One of them
That's
actually is a phenomenal book that I kind of was going to bring up earlier. It's called Life Without Ed. It's about this woman, do you know it, who went through her eating disorder and named her eating disorder Ed. I just think that's you were kind of alluding to that earlier. Anyways, just thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
You're
And
welcome.
tell us how we can follow you, where we can buy your book. How can the community engage with this incredible message that you're spreading?
The best is through my website. You can find me. I have like actually a quiz on where your stuckness lies. Yeah, my website is great. It has my books, it has my blogs, my psychology blogs. I also have a YouTube channel that has a new guided meditation publication every Thursday morning. So I'm always kind of, and hopefully I'm thinking about writing a third book. So that will hopefully be out in a little bit too.
And you're on social media too?
Yes, yes. Instagram, yeah, everything. You could totally find me.
We'll
Yes.
link it below. We'll link your website. We'll link a link to the book as well.
Thank
Dr. Maidenberg, thank you so much for your time.
you so much for having me.